Good morning, everybody. I can only echo all the wonderful things that Arlo's been saying and everybody has been saying, and I want to thank Arlo, thank the committee, thank the staff, thank the volunteers, thank everybody for putting on this great event. You know, in poetry, any poet worth his salt will fly halfway around the world to speak to an audience of 3 people. So when at 9 in the morning we have such a full house, it's extraordinary, and it's really great, and it's typical of this event. So the title of my poetry reading, we don't usually give poetry readings titles, but we are in this instance, is At the Ruins of Miami Beach. And I've lived with my family in Miami Beach for the last 30 years, and my awareness of Earth's fragility and the eco-catastrophe that's lurking around us is all because we live there. We live in Florida, where the water is so visible, and we're aware of what that means. So I'm going to read poems today. They're all going to be Florida-centric. I moved to Florida in 1993, and about 10 years later I published this book, Florida Poems, so a whole book of poems about Florida. That was the first 10 years I spent just trying to understand where it was I had crash landed, what the names of the plants were and the birds and how different the world was. And I've written about other places, but now I have a new book will be coming out in a couple of years, which again picks up Florida as a real theme. So I'm going to kind of divide in half and read first a bunch of smaller poems, short lyric poems. I'm going to set my timer so I know exactly what I'm doing here. And then the second half, I'm going to read to you from a long poem that will be the kind of final poem in my forthcoming book. That book is really about the Atlantic Ocean as a historical space, an ecological space, and everything that has crossed it one way or another. But I am going to just set this timer, go. No, wrong. And the final poem in that book is a long poem called At the Ruins of Miami Beach. It's very long, so I'm going to read to you probably about half of it, not the first half or the second half, but I've kind of spent the last few days chopping it up on the page to make sure I get the right parts for you. Well, every good story should start with a creation myth. And here is a creation myth for Florida. The Lord God created the earth and peopled it with his children. And when the Lord came to Florida, he bid them go forth and subdivide. Go forth and subdivide. I think the airplane swallowed the punchline. You know, very few states have real estate developers as their totemic originating figures, but we do in Florida. Here's another very short poem, The Key Lime. Curiously yellow hand grenade of flavor. Molotov cocktail for a revolution against the bland. Here is a poem called Stiltsville. Stiltsville, if you're not, is a very Keys-like place, but it's actually in Miami. It's located off the southern edge of Key Biscayne. And it's a set of fishing shacks and seasonal houses that were, their heyday was in the 1930s-ish. But they're still there, a bunch of the Stiltsville houses out in the shallows of Biscayne Bay. Although now most of that water has become part of Biscayne National Park. So the houses are being, as people pass away, the houses are taken back by the Park Service and they're no longer in public use. But the space is still there, and it's really a cool space that points towards Florida's past, but also perhaps with rising waters towards our future. And this poem is about an event that happened about 20 years ago. It's kind of self-explanatory. Stiltsville. 20 years ago, Michael and I gave a poetry reading from the deck of one of its ramshackle fishing shacks. kayaking out on a gorgeous winter night, drinking wine beneath a sky crossed by wagon trains of moonlit clouds, beds of turtle grass, bone-white casuarina trunks engraved with the strange calligraphy of sea worms. Today it lies within the bounds of Biscayne National Park, and its homes have been sequestered from private use. The last sun-bleached, stilt-propped shanties, a reminder of Miami's beginnings and model for what is to come. Moonlight, poetry, the past. We sang a song going out, another paddling back. What were they? Read a couple poems from Florida Poems. This is an old poem. I wrote it actually even before that book came out, and I, of course, have to read it here since it's about Ernest Hemingway in Key West. And it's called Hemingway Dines on Boiled Shrimp and Beer. I'm the original two-hearted brawler. I gnaw the scrawny heads from prawns, pummel those mute, translucent crustaceans, wingless hummingbirds, salt water spawned. As the Catalonians do, I eat the eyes at once. My brawny palms flatten their mainstays. I pop the shells with my thumbs, then crunch. Just watch me as I swagger and sprawl, spice-mad and sated, then dabble in lager before I go strolling for stronger waters down to Sloppy Joe's. My stride as I stagger shivers the islands. My fingers troll 1,000 keys. My appetite shakes the rock of the nation. The force of my miction makes the mighty Gulf Stream. I guess that's another alternative founding god figure for literary Florida, perhaps, or at least for literary Key West. This poem's called The Manatee. We actually saw there was a manatee in the harbor yesterday, right when we were getting on the boat to take our morning cruise from the seminar. I don't know how many people caught sight of it, but if you're not from Florida, it's super exciting to see a manatee. Even if you are from Florida, it's very exciting to see a manatee. Deep sunk in the dream time of his terminal coma, the manatee persists like a vegetative outpatient, victim of the whirling propellers of impatience and a buoyantly bovine quiescence gone nova. Dream deep, brother. Dream long and deep, sister sea cow. May millennia of soft tides and seagrass sustain thy sleep across the dark ages of extinction. May your memory keep heavy the hearts and hulls of your inheritors, us for now. Here's a poem from my most recent book. It's called Ode to History. I'm often like a historical kind of sociologist. I'm kind of a sociologist in disguise as a poet, or a local historian, perhaps, in this case, a Florida historian. This poem's called Ode to History, and it takes place, although it's not really part of the text, it's based on something out in the Redlands, kind of the agricultural land down south of Miami. Ode to History. At the crossroads, I am lost and pull the car over and get out. Farms as far as the eye can see, fields of vegetables in brilliant sunlight. No matter how hard I try, I will never create anything as beautiful as this ripple of water cupped in a purple cabbage leaf. Hidden in the ditch is a puddle full of ducklings, 14 or 15 of them, surrounding their wide-eyed mother, while yards away, motionless and imperturbable, stands the great blue heron that would snatch them in an instant. Always the same question, an equation of what is and what may be against what has been lost, Is it worth the cost? Will it be? How could it ever not be? Carefully embossed documents, maps imbued with ancient ink, chronicles and archives. The past is paper, and the present a match, igniting what fires will come. Now I want to read a poem. Thank you very much. You do not need to applaud, but I appreciate the thought. You can applaud for this next song if you want, because it's about my wife and I's grand dog, Magnolia. Yeah, I said I'm sure we will love grandkids if they ever show up, but for now, the grand dog is awesome. Actually, the grand dog, Magnolia, will be working in the booklegger's tent back there, truck back there. So, and this is a small poem that takes place in our backyard in Miami Beach. Theology. Physics is not the dog's strongest subject. Again and again, she leaps toward the treetops where miserable squirrels make her life a torment. And the butterflies, newly emerged, quaking in sunlight as their wings dry, inches from her nose, trembling before blossoming into flight. Whatever they are, it would make no sense to leap after them, she understands, watching them disappear with a judicious tilt of the head, as if theology was her natural discipline. Thank you, yes. And I hope Magnolia is listening and hears that. So I'm going to read one more short poem, then I'm going to move into that pieces from the long poem. This is called On the Three Forms of Water. So again, for writing this book about the Atlantic Ocean, I've been reading all sorts of books for about a decade now about oceans, waters, the science, the history, the sociology of anything to do with it. And one weird thing about water, of course, is that it's a chemically unique, a kind of physically unique thing that can exist in three states, as we all know: solid, ice, liquid, water, and mist, like clouds. So on the three forms of water. Ever since I learned about sea level rise, I've been binge watching the Atlantic Ocean, but nothing ever really happens. It goes up, it goes down. Sometimes high tide floods a section of the city, which is nice for canoeists and street sweepers. I'm so used to thinking about myself that it's hard to understand the sea. What use is singularity in imagining that seamless quicksilver commonwealth? The ocean is liquid, like the mind, elastic tides of consciousness flowing and probing, interrogating whatever seeks to contain it. Ice is like the body, scarred and fractured, ordained to crack, diminish, melt away. And the third form, fog on a window, ghostly mist, the clouds which adorn the sky and celestial vestments we glimpse as gaudy rags at sunset. What could it be but the soul? We are liquid and we are solid, oceanic matter cloaked in the garment of being. As for the ocean, she is coming to collect us and gather us back into herself, as when, long ago, your mother picked you up early from the nurse's office at school and gave you a kiss and put you to bed, where you slept without a care in the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to read for about 15 minutes from this long poem. It takes a lot of diversions. It's parts of the poem that I'm cutting out are a history of the Atlantic Ocean from Pangea till the present moment, in geological terms. Maybe, you can read that on the page later. So this is focusing on kind of our life in Miami Beach, the history of Miami Beach, and kind of the world we live in. And it's called At the Ruins of Miami Beach. The surprise, in retrospect, is not the city's vanishing, but its ever having been. The unlikely dredging up from salt muck and blade-sharp undergrowth of something with a passing resemblance to land, however permeable, However tenuous the plan to pinion mangrove sandbars into skinny islands, elaborated over the century with golf courses and finger canals and a glut of grandiose, stage-lit, palm-encircled trophy homes. A great dream born of the ocean and to its briny bosom returned. Such shall be the future's judgment, tut-tutting our folly, which indeed it was, foolhardy, laughable, a contract between the devil and the mortgage broker and the deep blue sea. A lesser paradise it may be, but there are seasons here when the ocean takes your breath away. No colds or hots, only the ambient warmth of wind and tide harmoniously synced to the body's inner weather. There is that moment on the still warm sand in the just gathered darkness, cruise ships blazing against the shadow milk horizon, sunset clouds lush as skinless jewels. It's time to go. Your friends are folding up beach chairs, recorking the wine. But how can you leave when the millionaire's condos shine so invitingly, though you were not invited, and the hotel lights and the lights of inbound airplanes and of stars flying outward toward the edge of an ever-expanding universe glitter indistinguishably? Or are such distinctions simply irrelevant in paradise? Our house, with 3 decades of family history penciled on windowsills, etched into once wet cement, sits precisely 5.5 feet above sea level. Not bad for these parts, 5 feet, but not enough to survive the trials to come. Looking back, our lack of guile seems absurdly unimaginative. Have we gleaned nothing from history, from philosophy? Permanence is an illusion, I learned years ago from Heraclitus and Basho and possibly Steve Miller. Time keeps on slipping into the future. But applying ontological truths to one's own life is a slippery business, irksome and counterintuitive, so we resist, cling to the moment, struggle to preserve what we have known, familiar comforts, the status quo, a trope of heartbreaking naivete. Global warming, sea level rise, climate change. It's a problem in need of a catchier nickname, a tagline to match the competition's bravado, earthquake, mudslide, wildfire, volcano. No, ours is the laziest of disasters, less a cataclysm than a seizure of assets, an implacable dispossession. We don't even need to get our sandals wet. The ocean only wants to borrow our pails and shovels, our beach towels, beaches, cities, coastlines, an unlucky state or two. To the young, it seems an injustice afflicted upon them by self-indulgent boomers. To me, it feels tragic yet strangely inevitable. I'm finding it harder, year by year, to separate my worry for the planet from the specter of my own mortality, projecting the movie of my melancholy upon the ocean's screen. Why not? We are both middle-aged, me and the Atlantic. We should be cranking ZZ Top tunes together, eulogizing glory days. I recall a world before Starbucks, and it remembers the breakup of Pangea, the sundering of continents, puzzle piece refugees yearning for Gondwanaland. It remembers the Zanclean flood, when a ridgeline it had rubbed against for ages, like a horse scratching a monumental itch, buckled, and first a trickle, then faster and faster, a caterwauling influx sluiced into the adjacent basin, creating, by happenstance, the Mediterranean Sea. And I remember what? Obscure commercials from Saturday morning TV. King Vitaman, have breakfast with the king, King Vitaman, as the jingle jangled relentlessly through my child-sized brain. At no point was I encouraged to interrogate carbon emissions, or industrialize farming, or the fragility of Antarctic glaciers. At no point did I possess the pertinacity to question the consumerist ethos within which I was submersed. Palmolive, you're soaking in it. At no point did I wonder if crucial lessons for our future might be encoded in, say, the Zanclean flood, compared to which, in all honesty, Our current troubles seem little more than ebb and flow. If we were fish or mermaids, salt water would be central to our histories. But we are earthbound, and the sea remains inhuman, analphabetic, innumerate, and therefore unbribable, and things that money can't buy make us nervous. The ocean's text resists the storyteller's task, preferring continuity to climax, repetition to narrative acts. The sea is too self-assured in its orthodoxy, too hard to pin down. You can't sink your teeth into it, square its edges, work it with gears or levers, mill it or drill it or quarry or crack or hammer it flat. Now there's a whole history of the world here, which I'm skipping over, getting to Florida. We're just getting to the Florida part of it. Florida's faux heroic scion, Juan Ponce de Leon, tagged along on Columbus's second voyage, then served in Puerto Rico with fit ruthlessness to satisfy his masters, slaughtering those infidels who would not convert and later those who had. On the scale of sociopathic violence, he scores about average for a second-rate conquistador. Though his quest for the fountain of youth displays a taste for magical realism or fathomless gullibility. Anyway, when his big break arrived, it came to naught. The Calusa killed him with a poisoned arrow before he could plant a colony on Tampa Bay. Trivia quiz. Name a famous Floridian. Anyone? Tiny Hawaii spawned a president. Ohio has sired 7, but we have yet to launch a single soul into any orbit of power or pantheon of science, industry, or art. Zora Neale Hurston, sure, but she was born in Alabama, as was our only distinguished politician, Osceola. Has any state contributed less to the Republic's glory? There is no New York hubris or Midwestern modesty or eyes of Texas self-importance. Florida has no mythos or master narrative to bow down to, no Olympian aegis to shield it from the glare of our eponymous sun. There remain to this day enormous parts of Florida where nothing ever happens. Satellite Beach, Malabar, Port St. Joe, Manasota Key. Nothing, ever. Fishermen troll away days from lime-washed causeways. Couples stroll the strand at dawn looking for sun rays or false angel's wings tossed up by gentle waves. Ospreys make sly withdrawals of silver while pelicans crash the buffet. Not much beyond grouper sandwiches with curly fries and pitchers of cheap beer. Since the fountain of youth ran dry, such is the essence for which Florida has become renowned. Haphazard quietude, casually gorgeous somnolescence. Miami's relationship to the rest of the state is that of a bull gator to his pond, the wolf to the little lambs, the stripper at a church social full of unwary husbands. Miami is also earnest, sensual, diverse, tolerant, a freewheeling, multilingual, multicultural model for a forward-facing American society that for decades seemed inevitable and now at risk of dying stillborn. It's a conundrum, a paradox, but hardly an enigma. Miami wears too little clothing to appear suggestive. It's a beautiful body enjoying the beach, oblivious to sensory inputs more complex than coconut oil, sunlight on water, the faint buzz of airplanes towing signs for nightclub DJs and imported rum. Now we're in Miami for a minute, Miami Beach. From the western rise of the Julia Tuttle Causeway, where the intracoastal waterway passes beneath the bridge, you look north across staggered stretches of Biscayne Bay, chopped into blue and crystal green quilting squares at clusters of tall buildings ranked as far as the eye can see. Nearest are the condos on Treasure Island near the Pelican Sanctuary, originally warehouses for surplus grandmothers, now occupied by personal trainers and dental assistants commuting to work in pastel smocks. Next, the plutocratic designer brand beachfront palaces owned by seasonal money from Wall Street or Caracas. And still farther, past the missing tooth of Haulover Beach, past the dreadful Soviet-light megaliths of Sunny Isles, a spray of tiny white spires diminishing ever further into the hinterlands. Horizon to horizon, it's a thrilling view, a panorama that looks like what the future was supposed to look like when I was a kid. Gloriously Disneyfied apotheosis for an era that imagined technology a single-edged sword with which to cut a path into the space age. My mother, God love her, believed that green beans grew in tin cans and TV dinners would prepare us to be astronauts. The glare of aluminum foil had corrupted her common sense. And yet I swear that even as the ocean consumes me, I will remember the taste of Salisbury steak with mushroom gravy. Memory makes a better preservative than whatever toxic goop Swanson poured into its apple cobbler. But the question is, how will they remember us? As technocratic savants or hedonistic wastrels? As fools bamboozled by money's deceitful abacus? Now that we know the costs of inattention, will we act with justice or servility? What will we sacrifice? Who will be saved? Which tokens of American glory will inform the future of our civilization's values? Crypto wallets? M16s? Real housewives of the abyss? Not all disappearances are shocking, mysterious, or unexplained. Unlike Pompeii, we were forewarned, and unlike Noah, we chose to ignore the portents, blissfully pagan in our sun worship, and thus condemned. Miami is no Atlantis. It will vanish clumsily, painfully. Failed sewage systems, corroded electrical grids, streets transformed to filthy canals, malarial, piratical, a charmless Venice. Florida will drown because porous limestone cannot withstand an age of rising seas. Miami will disappear because it is a bauble, and the days of easy luxury are drawing to a close. The age of oil will end, the age of plastic vortices, the age of exploitation and appropriation of personhood denominated in dollars, the age of denial but not the age of human folly. Vanishing is an act for which we prepare from birth. We grow old surrounded by familiar faces, or they move to the villages and we age among strangers. But you'll never be lonely with the ocean for a neighbor. It's always stopping by to borrow a cup of sugar, chat about the kids, flood the garage with storm surge. Miami Beach rose dripping from the sea, dredged and primped and packaged for sale. Not a place, but a palimpsest, a century of footprints in wet sand. As surely as it's founded, every city is sooner or later abandoned. We've been living in ruins all along. So it shines, golden in the sunlight, and so it slips past, piling sandbags along the levee, chopping down trees in the forest of years, kneeling and offering all there is to offer up to the gods of everyday disorder. 5 o'clock, we're close enough. My work is done. Time for a walk to the beach and a swim. That's the end of that. Thank you very much. I'm going to close with a short poem. I'm just getting my 5-minute warning now, so I'm just going to read one more short poem. Let's also, was that pessimistic or optimistic? I don't know. This is maybe a nicer note to end on, though, irregardless, okay? This is a poem called The Everglades. I noticed, thanks to Arlo, who laid out, that it's right at the beginning of the program for this year's thing, which is really lovely. And it's actually a poem, a number of years ago, the National Park Service had a project in conjunction with the Academy of American Poets, where they asked poets, I don't know if Richard did one of these or not, asked poets to write a poem about a national park in their home state. And they contacted me, and I guess there's Biscayne Bay National Park, but I'm not really a boat person. There's the Everglades, and there's maybe one more. Anyway, I said, I would love to write a poem about the Everglades, a place we've always enjoyed visiting casually. So this poem is called The Everglades. green and blue and white. It is a flag for Florida, stitched by hungry ibises. It is a paradise of flocks, a cornucopia of wind and grass and dark, slow waters. Turtles bask in the last tatters of afternoon. Frogs perfect their symphony at dusk. In its solitude, we remember ourselves dimly as creatures of mud and starlight. Clouds and savannas and horizons, its emptiness is an antidote. Its ink illuminates the manuscript of the heart. It is not ours, though it is ours to destroy or preserve. This, the kingdom of otter, kingfisher, alligator, heron. If the sacred is a river within us, let it flow like this, serene and magnificent, forever. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.